Hi there! If you've watched the previous video, you already know how to animate an existing web page. In this video, we're going to create an SVG animation entirely from scratch. We learn how to explore your design to SVG and how to use that for animation. And finally, we learn how to use the Webplayer and make the animation interactive. For this video, I've searched the web for an existing SVG animation that we could use to recreate it with Spirit. I stumbled upon an animation created by Gal Shear. And as you can see, the design and motion is fairly simple. Let's create this animation in Spirit. First, we need to create our assets. So head over to a design tool. I'm using Illustrator, but feel free to use any other design tool, as long as it can export to SVG. I've already created the vector shapes for you. You can download the Illustrator and SVG file in the description below. An important thing to note is that during the design process, you need to be aware on how to properly set up your layers in order to be able to animate it with Spirit. Open the Layers panel and give unique names for layers you'd like to animate. We've created a line, we've created the left cactus, which is a group. And in that group, we have a left pot and a left body. When we open the left body, which is a group as well, we have a left mouth and left eyes. There's no need to name the layers you don't animate. And for the right cactus, we have the same groups. We have a right pot, we have a right body, and the right body has eyes as well. So we have our assets in place. Now we need to export it. Head over to File, Export, Export for Screens, and make sure to select the format SVG. Go to Settings, select SVG, and make sure the Presentation Attributes is selected. Export the artboard, and a SVG is generated for you. With Spirit, we can create animations directly in the web page. The first thing we need to do is include the SVG in a HTML file. Therefore, open your favorite editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code here, which is a free and open source code editor, and it is available for Windows, Linux, and Mac. Now open the project folder in your code editor. We create a new file. Let's call it index.html. If you're using Visual Studio Code, you can type doc and hit the tab key to autocomplete the HTML document. Next, we need to copy and paste the SVG into the body tag. Head over to your SVG file. For the SVG tag, we only need the view box, so remove the rest and remove the title as well. And we can see that for each layer that has a name, Illustrator automatically adds IDs. And to make sure Spirit resolves the right element, we have to rename ID to data-spirit-id. Select ID, including the first double quote, right-click and select Change All Occurrences, and rename it to data-spirit-id. Now select the entire SVG and copy and paste it into the body element. When we open the file, you can see that the SVG is larger than the actual viewport itself. Let's fix that. We can do this by adding some styling. The HTML and body element must fill the entire space. We want the SVG to be centered on the screen, and we can accomplish this by using Flexbox on the body element. And now the last thing we need to do is make sure that the SVG never exceeds the viewport height. Let's see it in action. Let's refresh. And whenever we resize the browser, the SVG keeps in the center of the viewport. Now we have prepared our design for animation. It's time to finally animate it. Open Spirit and connect the web page. Now let's create a new group. Call it Cactus. And we select the elements we'd like to animate. We use Chrome DevTools, so we have more control on the elements we would like to select. As you can see, you can use the Elements panel to find the right element. Now we add the right cactus, we add the left cactus, and we add the line. Next, we add left body. We add the left pot, and we can easily see how the elements are nested into each other. So the left body and the left pot are direct children of the left cactus. Let's make the window a little bit bigger. Select the eyes and the mouth. And notice when I roll over the layers here, the related element is highlighted in Chrome DevTools. Now let's add the right body and the right pot. And within the right body, we want to animate the right eyes. So let's add that as well. Now we have all the elements we'd like to animate. Create the group, and let's start playing with the animation. Press Edit, and now you see a complete timeline editor where you can animate the selected elements. We have a line, we have the right cactus, right pot, right body, within that, right eyes, left cactus, left pot, left body, left eyes, and the left mouth. Let's start with the line element. We want the line to be drawn from left to right. And as with many things, there are multiple ways to accomplish this. One way would be to animate the Scale X property with a transform origin on the left. But as you can see, we are dealing with a line element here, and instead of scaling things, we can also animate an attribute on the element itself. A line element support attributes like x1 and x2. And those two attributes define how long the line element should be. Create a custom property and type attr.x2. And as you might know, attr is an abbreviation of attribute. Open Chrome DevTools and click on the little icon on the left. Now the line element is selected, and as you can see, the x2 property has a value of 651. Whenever we change this value here, you see the value updated automatically in Chrome DevTools. Let's find the start position, which should be here. Zoom out a bit and move the playhead to, let's say, 1 second. And drag the slider till we have the desired end position. And let's use exponential ease in out. And finally, let's play with the duration a bit so it looks more natural. That takes too long. Let's fix it to 1.25. Now we are done with the line. Let's move over to the left cactus. Once the length of the line reaches the cactus, we want the cactus to pop up. We're going to vertically scale the element. Select the Scale Y property. Next, we need to find the start position, which seems to be somewhere around half a second. Create a keyframe. Progress in time. Create another keyframe. Select the first one and drag the slider up and down. And instead of dragging, we can type in the exact value by clicking on the input. Now type in 0 and hit enter. Duplicate the first keyframe by pressing the Alt key and dragging the first keyframe to the left. By default, the scaling is applied from the center of this element, but we need to scale it from the bottom. Let's add a new property called Transform Origin. Make sure the playhead is at the beginning of your animation and change the Transform Origin to bottom. You can also use pixels or percentages for Transform Origin, and as for any other property, if you are not sure what value to use, you can always reference the CSS documentation. And to simulate a spring effect, we choose Elastic Ease Out. See how easy it is to create advanced animations? We've created this interesting animation with just a few keyframes. Let's continue to the next element. Now we apply the same animation to the right cactus. So we add Scale Y, and we add Transform Origin. And we want to apply the transforms from the bottom. Find the start position, which should be here. Create a keyframe. progress in time. It should end here, so add another keyframe. Select the first one and set that to 0 and duplicate the keyframe. Change the ease to elastic ease out, and here it is. Now, can you imagine if you have to write this animation by code? With Spirit, you can compose the animation visually and focus on things that really matters, like the aesthetics and timing, for instance. You can zoom in to microseconds and fine-tune the animation in every detail. We're just improvising a bit here, so what shall we animate next? Let's move the eyes from the left cactus. Add a property X. Create a keyframe and move the eyes to the right. Add a Y property. Select this keyframe so it is in sync. And let's move the eyes a little bit to the top. We're changing the ease value to back ease in out. Same applies for the Y property. So here it is. And for the right cactus, we want him to blink with his eyes, and then he should look at his friend on the left. For the blinking part, we add a scale Y property, create a keyframe, scale it down, and copy the first keyframe. Create the start keyframes, progress in time, move it a little bit to the left, a little bit to the bottom, change the ease to back ease in out. Same for the Y property. Let's move on to the next element. Here we're going to wiggle the body of the right cactus. Therefore, we need to add the properties rotate and transform origin. Instead of rotating from the center, we want to rotate it from the bottom of the pot. We set the value to 50% and 100%, which means that it is horizontally centered and vertically it is aligned to the bottom. We could have used the keywords center and bottom, but we want to play with the values a little bit. Let's increase the vertical transform point so the rotating point is not from the bottom of the element, but a little bit lower. Whenever we change the rotation, we see that the cactus is rotating more naturally. Let's create the wiggling effect. So we start at 0, we progress in time, rotate to the far left, rotate to the far right. Rotate to the left again, and finally rotate it to the right and copy the first keyframe so we end it in the same position as we started. Now adjust the timing a little bit. Apply eases on the keyframes so the motion looks more natural. It still looks a little bit silly. Let's zoom in a bit so we have more control of the timing. Move the keyframes more to each other, and as the time progresses, we decrease the space between the keyframes. This way we make the spring effect stronger. Now zoom out again and play the complete animation. As you can see, we're not recreating the original animation. Instead, we're just improvising a bit. Add the position properties on the left body. progress in time. Create the keyframes. This is our starting position. Let's move the playhead a little bit further and move the X value. At the same time, move the Y value as well, so the cactus hits the ground. And now we have this linear animation. We want the cactus to jump out of the pot. Add a keyframe for the Y property somewhere in the middle. Now I'm going to fast forward a bit. We're just playing a little bit with the timing and the eases so we get a more natural way of jumping. There are so many properties to animate, and each element type has its own set of animatable properties. Now we're working with SVG elements. This means that we can also use SVG-specific properties, like drawing a dashed line. We're going to add another element to our animation, and you can do this by clicking on the Add Element button and find the element in the Elements tab of Chrome DevTools. In this particular case, we are looking for the element that contains the black outline of the left cactus, which is this one. Let's add that to our animation so it appears in Spirit Studio. Now give it a proper name so we know that we're dealing with the outline element. Now add a new property. Go to SVG, Stroke, and add the stroke-array. OK, create a keyframe, progress in time, and we want to start animating the stroke-array from here. Move a little further and drag the slider up. And as you can see, the first value in the stroke-array is actually the gap between the dashes. You can also add multiple values to define the length of the dashes and the gaps. Now add stroke-offset. You can simply drag the slider up and down to move the position of the dashes. Now that we have created our animation, it's time to export it. Go back to the overview of all our animations on the web page. Hit the Save button and save the animation to your local file system. Spirit Studio exports a JSON file containing the complete animation. And important to know is that things like assets are not stored in this file. Here's our created animation. Okay, we created our animation directly in the browser. We've saved the animation. Now it's time to embed it on the web page. Head over to spiritapp.io/getstarted and scroll all the way down. To play the animation on your web page, you need to include the Spirit Webplayer. Now, let's copy the embed script for the Webplayer and paste it just before the closing body tag. You might be wondering why we use the embed code here. This HTML document is parsed synchronously from top to bottom, and at this point, we know that our assets are successfully parsed. It's time to play our animation. Create a script tag, and within that script tag, we're going to write a little bit of JavaScript. Here we go. Spirit.loadAnimation. Parentheses, curly braces, which is an object with animation data. Here we can copy and paste our exported animation data. Head over to cactus.json and copy the contents of the file, and of course, paste it into your document. Now when you reload the web page, you see the animation playing. Let's take this a little bit further. Add auto start false, so our animation is paused by default. And load animation is a promise, which means that the animation is loaded asynchronously. Let's add a log statement so we know that the animation is loaded successfully. For this demo, I'm going to use browser sync so the web page reloads automatically when we make changes to our index.html. Of course, browser sync is not a requirement. You can also manually refresh the web page after you make changes. Let's open Chrome DevTools. Put the browser on the right and the code editor on the left. And we can see that our animation is loaded. The Webplayer is using GSAP for the animation playback. And once the animation is loaded, it returns a valid GSAP timeline, which you can control directly. Let's add the timeline to our log statement. So now that we know we have a valid GSAP timeline, we're going to use the timeline API to play the animation manually. Although we have defined AutoStart false, the animation is still playing. We made a little mistake here. AutoStart should be renamed to AutoPlay. Now the animation is paused by default, and we can play the animation manually. Let's play the timeline. And with the GSAP timeline, you can use other methods as well. Let's bind the animation to our mouse position. On mouse move, we use the progress method, which expects a value between 0 and 1. We get the client X, which is the current horizontal mouse position, and we divide that by the screen width. And whenever we move the mouse, the animation updates accordingly. You can see that making the animation interactive is really easy. Next, we're going to play the animation on demand. Let's create 2 buttons. One to play the animation, and another to play the animation reversed. Next, we store the animation in a variable. And we create 2 methods called play and play reverse. Now let's start with implementing the play method. Timeline.play at timeframe 0, which is the beginning. And when we hit the play button, nothing happens. Oh, we forgot to add parentheses to execute the method. Let's try again. Now when we hit the play button, the animation starts playing from the beginning. For the play reversed method, we need to reference the documentation on the GSAP timeline. As you can see, there are a bunch of methods you can use, so getting familiar with the tween and timeline API will definitely benefit you. Now we are looking for a method where we create a new tween object, which plays the complete animation in reverse, and it seems that the tweens from to method is exactly what we are looking for. Here we can define the start position and the end position, and it returns a new tweenable object. Okay, let's get back to our code. Timeline.tween from to and the start position, which is the end of our animation. We can retrieve that with timeline.duration. And it should animate to the start of our animation, which is 0. Let's see it in action. Great! Our animation is playing backwards now. Now, if you press the play reversed button while the other animation is still playing, the animation stops and jumps right to the end. Right now, the start position is a fixed variable, either 0 or the total duration. And we can easily fix this by using the current time, so the animation starts where the previous one ended. Let's find out how we can get the current time. We can use the time method to get the current position of the animation. Replace the first function argument to timeline.time, and it should animate to the end. For the play reverse, it should play from the current time and animate to the beginning. And this is the result of our animation. As you can see, Spirit is really powerful, and there's some awesome features in development that makes creating animations even easier. In this video, we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more you can do with Spirit, so make sure to check out the documentation. Try Spirit for free at spiritapp.io.